outside the economic scope. You apply that economic knowledge in the agricultural, in the health sector, in the environmental sector. So the question that needs to always be in your mind is, if an environmental action is being taken, does it make economic sense? And if it makes economic sense, what are the implications of that economic sense that is making by ensuring that we move away from fossil fuels, from depending on fossil fuels that add to the atmosphere, to maybe developing a solar panel? And how does that action fit into the health aspect, into the health equation, by reducing air pollution? How does it fit into ensuring that development is not occurring at the expense of people's health? So that kind of question continuously being asked, and also bringing that up in the discussions in your class or even at your workplace becomes very important. For example, I'm an environmentalist, but I think through the economic lens and also the social lens. How does a mother who is in a village in the northwestern part of Cameroon, for example, who doesn't have up to about $3, who depends on less than $3 a day, how can that mother assess an opportunity, an environmental solution opportunity to add value, to dry her vegetable, to dry her maize, to dry her wheat, but at the same time ensure that that is not causing an environmental damage, but helping her put more money in her pockets and put on the table? This brings the socio-economic dimension, the environmental dimension, but at the same time, it means for that action to happen, I cannot do it alone. I will need to ensure that at least this, for this to be taken up quickly, they need to be integrated to be part of the educational curriculum. Value addition being taught. That will then mean that I will need to also ensure that at least for that to be integrated and funded, the finance dimension needs to be brought into it, and the Ministry of Finance policy needs to be part of it. I will need to ensure that, because that is actually about food, the agricultural dimension needs to be brought into it. And so this is a conversation that is not something that will happen tomorrow or this afternoon. It's a process. And because the knowledge now we're discussing it can then be taken and discussed in other forums in which we are part of, that now will start to become the mainstream narrative. Because the problem today is that this harmonization of policies to gear towards driving transformational development is not happening, and it's not part of the mainstream narrative. So if you can now start to make it part of the mainstream narrative, then you start to break those silos and now push a different way of thinking that will move forward. And I've said it starts from the classroom, it gets to the curriculum, but it also has to get to policies. And those who are drivers of policies are the elected members of parliament. They need to be put in your community. Bring this debate. Bring this debate. How can you be able to ensure that Canada complies with the Accountability Act of reducing low emissions? It's not just about the environment, it's about our health. It's about incentives for young people to develop the technologies or develop their businesses so that they are contributing to the implementation of that Accountability Act. And that way you will reduce emissions. That means air pollution will be reduced and health of citizens will actually be intact. That means that people put more money in more pockets, because the enabling environment and government funding is going to go into those initiatives. That's an economic policy. That's a health policy. That information and those solutions need now to be integrated into the education curriculum and taught practically. And that's now really how you can drive society. So it's a system approach.
That's not there. The way our curriculum is designed, it's so inflexible, that it's, I think the curriculums are done maybe every 10 years, and there's always pushback.
Yes. Yeah. Part of the like what you've done today, you brought me into our conversation.
Yeah.
So I think part of the actions are not necessarily to change curriculum from scratch, but to innovate around done today.
Yeah.
Bringing in people who are not necessarily in academia, but who are practitioners.
Yeah.
In testing some of these concepts and taking them forward. I think that way they prepare students in such a way that at least they start to see the reality of things, and then infuse that into the theoretical understanding of how things can be done, and then that takes that forward. I think that is the best way to do that. Yes. Any other question? Yes.
Do you think the responsibility for environmental change in the future will lie more with governmental policy, or do you think it will lie more with businesses?
Excellent question.
That's a great question.
Excellent question. It will lie with both and even with the individual citizens. Because you see, the role of government is to create an enabling environment for businesses and enterprises to thrive. And the beauty is that if you look at what governments are doing, they're putting policies in place. And I mentioned the case of Canada, and I also mentioned the case of Africa, where there are a lot of policies. But what businesses are supposed to do is that if you look at climate change, it's over 7-8 trillion US dollars business opportunity. If you are able to tap into that as a business person, given the fact that the enabling environment has already been set by the government, putting in place in case of Canada, the Accountability Act, then it then means you are going to benefit from the incentives, the tax rebates, the tax incentives that come as a result of taking action on climate change, which Canada is currently doing at the moment. Which then will also mean that you are going, because everybody is going to comply in making sure that at least their energy moving into the future is renewable, is clean. That means you will then be able to tap into that market as a business person and seize that opportunity. So the way I say that it is everyone's responsibility. Government responsibility is to put the enabling environment and enforce it. Then the businesses are supposed to take that over, because if they're not taking over to tap into the enabling environment, they will be fined by the government and they will now become a liability in their business because they're going to pay a lot of fines. The citizens themselves have to comply, because if you are now moving towards clean energy and every citizen is supposed to use it, you don't have a choice, you have to comply. But the beauty is, I look at it from the perspective of what can the young people especially do to benefit from the enabling policy from government? It's to start to look at opportunities in the environment, especially clean energy, especially agricultural value addition, whereby growing, because like I said, the example of wheat into countries. I know that Canada is not really importing wheat from, they produce wheat here, but there is climate change that is going to happen where yield reductions might go down, and the country might have to import from outside. But the importation of that food will have to be compliant. Was it produced in an environmental way? Is it organic or is it chemicalized food? So if you tap into that to understand that and be part of that value chain, you're going to make a lot of money.
So stop right there, because that one is one I've never heard, and that's amazing. So that is an opportunity, because we've all heard of the renewable energies, right?
Correct.
But you're saying this value addition of food.
Correct. Value addition of food. Because if you look at it, the changing climate is already happening. Yeah. The fact that the bomb harvest in Canada at the moment, with the temperatures increasing, there are going to be crop failure, yield reduction, and Canada to feed the population will have to import food. But Canada will not be importing food in raw form. And even if they import food in raw form, people will have to process it. So if you understand how to add value to agricultural products, will be part of the global supply chain of food that is actually produced in the way that we produce, because the importation of food will have standards, to have to apply to certification standards on aspects that are they contributing to emissions, the way they produce the food, or they produce the food in a way that was working with environmental against the environment. And so being part of that process and understanding and seizing the opportunity now prepares you to become a billionaire in the future, because that's a business opportunity that will happen. It will happen. We are at 1.1 degrees today. We all agree that we are seeing hurricanes, floods, and heat waves. That will translate to affecting the agricultural production of it. In Africa, we're already seeing it. There is a drought in East Africa now that is actually pointing over 12 million people into hunger. What does that mean? There is food importation. The reverse will be true in the future, where there will be some parts of Africa that will be producing so much food under the changing climate, because the weather will become more conducive, because the climate change is not evenly distributed. It changes. So these are opportunities.
Is that, so just sort of jump in from our conversation last night, so is that an opportunity then for, because you're saying the other issues in Africa, there's not a lot of trade in between?
Correct. Excellent. Actually, let me just take food trade. Africa trades only 20% among the 54 countries there. That means 80% is on tap. And at the same time, even the food that is being traded is not value added food, still in raw form. That means the opportunities are still not being tapped. So understanding that means you can be able to tap into those opportunities even though you are here, and because businesses into the future will be about partnerships. And partnerships will be about what you bring on board. And if you have knowledge of value addition, that's a big business opportunity.
No, go ahead.
Yes. So that is really an area because the focus has been on minerals for quite a very long time.
Yeah.
The focus has been on renewable energy, which is very, very important and will still be. But every day everyone eats. You cannot go, everybody eats. So the over 8 billion people in the world today, everybody this morning must have taken coffee, or you will eat lunch, or you will eat dinner in one way or the other. Everybody eats. And so when you look at the agro value chain, it keeps getting absent from the dimension of how to add that. And to add that value, you will need clean energy to do that. So because policies are currently in place, people are going to grant a lot of tax rebates. And so that's the fiscal policy I was mentioning. There are incentives, for example, whose governments in Africa are giving incentives to people who are producing solutions that can reduce indoor pollution, because indoor pollution is killing 700,000 African people. But across the world, air pollution is killing 9 million people.
Yeah.
So if you are able to turn agricultural waste, which are very simple technologies that we have trained young people to be doing, they're taking agricultural waste, they're turning it into fuel briquettes, which are replacing charcoal. Charcoal is actually wood that is cut down, burned, and then it's actually used as fuel wood in most communities across the continent. But for those who are able to turn agricultural waste into fuel briquettes, we burn faster, we don't limit, they are given, they don't pay taxes. So that's already an incentive that is being given. But very few people are benefiting from those because they do not have the skills and the ability or the capacity that has been developed to do so. So when you look at it from that, but that's now an environmental dimension of reducing indoor pollution. But it's a health related aspect. And at the same time, it is also an economic related aspect.
Yeah, that's a huge eye opener for me, because it all just kind of came into perspective where, it goes back to what you talked about at the beginning. When that lockdown first happened, right? And I know myself. So I left 2 weeks before because I saw the lockdown happening. But the most important thing was for me, and first time ever in my life, was to get to that grocery store and get stuff before it was out.
Right.
And I remember specifically going to, I think it was Loblaws at midnight, and it was so busy. It was like an asteroid was about to hit, and at that point I realized how important food was to me.
Right.
And I just remember and so, and now this really puts things into perspective, because that's something I would have never known. That's amazing. So this value addition of food. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
Very, very important. Yes. Any other question? Yes, please.
What would you say Canada and other countries are doing to help this right now?
Come again.
What do you think Canada's doing?
Actually, Canada is a leader. They're actually a global leader when it comes to environmental change. I mentioned that Canada actually put a law called the Net Zero Emission Accountability Act, which is actually to help the country to move away from, because what Canada is doing is very smart. The oil and gas industry of Canada is actually what is contributing to Canada's economy. But what they want to do is to invest more in renewables, so that at least, even though they're producing oil and gas, the emissions are going to be offset by renewable clean energy. that they actually trying to make sure that in the next 80 years today, the emissions of Canada will be reduced by 45%. And by 2050, which is about 28 years from today, Canada will be net zero. That means the emissions they produce and the actions they have taken and put in place, they are actually at zero. And that is an excellent opportunity. And when you look at also Canada's support to the entire global community, I mean, it's quite very positive when it comes to climate change, supporting countries, young girls and women, so that at least they can become climate resilient, and at the same time ensure that at least they have the systems in place to be able to cope with the changing climate. But what needs to be done is that for the effectiveness of Canada and any other developing country, because climate change is not something that any country is immune to. That's common sense. But what if the areas that, though there is climate change and there is increased temperatures, were areas in which more food would be produced, it would make sense for Canada to support African countries especially, and at the same time also the minerals that I said, Canada is moving towards clean energy, but the minerals for that production of renewable energy, solar panels, lithium, they are mostly in Africa. So working with Africa in partnership to be able to add value to those materials is also beneficial to Canada. So that symbiosis thinking of partnership is an opportunity to actually ensure that at least the entire world benefits. Yes? You have a question? I think I saw a hand.
Jeff,
You, I think,
did you have a question?
Yes?
No.
No.
Okay. So,
Okay.
go ahead.
About 5 more minutes, guys, and then, so if you got any questions, then just, I'm gonna give a little tour of the school too, so.
So what exactly is stopping Africa from refining these materials themselves?
Very good question. The first is the capacity to do that is not yet there. And second is that the educational system, as I said, have not actually integrated the aspects that are supposed to actually be looked at and the skills provided to the citizens through educational system to do so. And so there is a missing gap. That's why I said the educational system is not matching the challenges. And so what is taught is excellent, is relevant, but it's not really grounded on what needs to be done. And so there needs to be an educational system that focuses on the total skills of citizens to then be able to address the aspect of value addition, both in minerals and in the agricultural sector. What is stopping them goes back to the point that I made earlier, policy mismatch. You will see one policy that focuses on mineral extraction in a very sustainable way, but without putting the aspect of capacity building and education as the core pillar. You will see the education policy talking about educating everyone before 2030. The education is educating them on what? It's supposed to be educating everyone to add value addition. So the mismatch in terms of policy continuously happen and the problem continuously remain the same. And so to change that, there is this mindset shift that I mentioned, whereby the narrative, silo approaches to policy vis-a-vis the educational system and capacity building synchronized together, but I count on the young people who can now be able to pick this up to then put that together. Because the young people like you, people will be, most of you end up as policy makers, decision makers, business owners, and you have the ability now to advance some of these aspects of policy harmonization, of systemic thinking in such a way that what is done in one sector have direct implication with another sector. And if that system thinking approach is happening and implemented, then we will gradually start now to break these silos and move forward. And now I talked about partnerships, inclusive partnerships by developing countries with African countries to then add value, whether it is minerals, to ensure that at least the capacity is developed, then value is added to those minerals before they're exported, or agricultural products. Value is added to those agricultural products before they're exported. It's a win-win for the entire world.
Okay, one last question? One last question?
Yes.
What area of the environmental sector do you think has the most potential for innovation?
I think if you look at the world today, every area of the environment has potential for innovation because if you take climate change, the world urgently needs to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees. And as we're speaking today, the world is at 1.1 degrees. So we're just shy of 0.4 degrees. That then means innovations in new technologies to add value to agricultural produce, innovations in new technology to produce electricity, because currently the world is still emitting. And so the rapid uptake and production of those technologies is not very high. Or if you take pollution, pollution is everywhere. And so technologies to reduce those indoor pollution, especially like I said, 600 million Africans, for example, are energy impoverished. They do not have alternatives that can then be able to reduce that. So focusing on that, that's still an aspect of the environment. So when you look at it, there are every aspect, whether it is pollution or climate change or network-based solutions, all those aspects, they need innovations that can be developed. So anything environment is an opportunity, but it must be linked to food, health. So the thinking must be synergistically linked to food, to health, to finance, to the social aspects of society and all those sort of things.
Okay, well, brother, that's a lot there. So I just on behalf of the class, Richard, I just want to thank you for coming in. I think what I'm going to do is because I'm going to flush out this value addition of food, kind of in my lessons, and I think what I'll do is maybe at the end of April or in June, I'll do a Zoom with you, with the class, and kind of see, because that's that's fascinating, and then just kind of the links. So I just want to thank you, Richard, for coming in. I really appreciate it. It's good. Yeah, absolutely. If you guys I'll take a picture. If you guys can all go up there with Richard, so he can take it back to the United Nations. So if you guys can go all up there.
Climate action is the new buzzword, and why wouldn't it be? One world is all we have, and our world is at risk. Countries, corporates, and citizens claim to be doing all they can to save the planet from climate change. Green energy is being floated as one of the top solutions. We are replacing coal with hydropower, fossil fuels with solar energy, petrol and diesel cars with electric vehicles. EVs are being pitched as cleaner, greener, and sustainable. But are they? What's clean for the environment may not really be clean. Hidden beneath the shiny exteriors of an EV is a story of blood batteries. These cars drive human rights violations, extreme poverty, and child labor. Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. An electric car runs on battery, you know that. But do you know what these batteries are made of? Rare metals like lithium and cobalt. Cobalt gives the battery stability and allows it to operate safely. It's a bluish gray colored metal. It is found in the Earth's crust, or what we call crustal rocks. Cobalt has several uses, like in jet turbine generators, tool materials, pigments, and smartphone batteries. But its major use is in lithium-ion batteries. Half of the cobalt produced goes into electric cars. We're talking about 4 to 30 kilos of cobalt per battery. This metal is found all over the world, like in Australia, Canada, China, Cuba, South Africa, the United States, the Philippines, but 70% of the total supply comes from one country, Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's zoom into this country. DR Congo is the second largest country in Africa. Its GDP is around $49 billion. Congo is synonymous with conflict, poverty, and corruption. Beneath the country's red earth is the world's largest deposit of cobalt. 92 million people live here. Some 2 million depend on cobalt production. They are called negociants. Cobalt mining in Congo is divided into two categories: industrial or large-scale mining and artisanal or small-scale mining. What's the difference between the two? Artisanal mines are unregulated. Labor laws do not apply here. Neither do safety protocols. These mines produce 20 to 30% of Congo's cobalt. Some 200,000 miners work in these mines. At least 40,000 of them are children, some as young as 6. These children flirt with death daily. They enter vertical tunnels. Most of them are too narrow for adults to enter. Inside, it's like a furnace. The children dig for cobalt under inhuman conditions. Sometimes they have shovels, but mostly they dig with their bare hands. They have no masks, no gloves, no work clothes, and sometimes just 20 minutes worth of oxygen. But these young children go on for hours. After digging, they crush the rocks, they wash them, and carry their finds to the market to find a buyer. How much do these children make? Sometimes as little as $1. Cobalt is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is estimated to be worth $13.63 billion by 2027. But this money never reaches the child who is spotting and extracting the metal. In poverty-stricken Congo, even $1 is worth risking one's life. Many die trying to make this money. ABC recently profiled a woman who lost her son to a mine-related accident. The boy was 13 years old. He told his mother he was going to the market to buy coal for her so that she could cook. Instead, the boy went to a cobalt mine to try and earn an extra buck for the house. The mine embankment collapsed. The 13-year-old never returned home. Between 2014 and 2015, at least 80 artisanal miners died in Congo. In 2019, an accident killed 43 miners. According to one estimate, 2,000 illegal miners die in Congo every year. Many suffer permanent lung damage, skin infection, and life-changing injuries. In 2019, some families from Congo filed a lawsuit. They named companies like Tesla, accused them of aiding and abetting in the death and injury of children. The lawsuit spoke about a child. He was referred to as John Doe 1. John was working as a human mule since the age of 9. He would carry bags after bags of cobalt just for $0.75 a day. One day, John fell into a tunnel. Fellow workers dragged him out of it, but they left John alone on the ground. When the child's parents found out about the accident, they rushed to the mining site. It was too late. John was paralyzed. Doctors say he will never be able to walk again. Why do children work in these high-risk mines? Because of poverty and the hope to get out of it. Families in Congo are betting big on cobalt. It's like their crypto, their chance to make it big. The metal's demand has tripled in the last decade. It is expected to double again by 2035. The demand is being driven by electric vehicles. Today, there are more than 6.5 million EVs on the road. By 2040, that number will touch 66 million. So that's 66 million multiplied by 30 kilos of cobalt. Do the math. By 2050, the demand for cobalt production is expected to increase 585%. Congo's families want to ride this wave and tide over poverty. Sending their children to the mines is not a choice for them, but necessity. These children end up working as artisanal miners or informal workers. They're not employed by any company, but several companies line up to buy their finds. You see, it is cheaper to buy cobalt from a child than a regulated mine. And who understands business better than China? Most of these companies dealing in blood batteries are from China. It dominates the global supply chain of cobalt. China owns up to 50% of the metals production. It controls around 80% of cobalt's refining. In the last 15 years, Chinese companies have bought out North American and European companies mining in Congo. Today, Chinese firms own 15 out of the 19 industrial mines in this country. In exchange for Congo's cobalt, China has promised the country billions in investment in the form of infrastructure, schools, and roads. Now, Congo is another example of how stories featuring China never end well. Today, China is leaking blood cobalt into the supply chain of electric vehicles. Chinese companies are buying cobalt from children, encouraging them to participate in the trade of blood batteries. One of the largest cobalt processors in Congo is a company called CDM, or Congo Dongfang Mining. It is a subsidiary of Zhejiang Huayu Cobalt, a Chinese company, of course. Huayu supplies cobalt to electric car makers like Volkswagen. 40% of Huayu's cobalt comes from Congo. In 2016, the Chinese company was called out by an NGO. It was branded a benefactor of child labor. Huayu pledged to clean up its act. But did anything change on the ground? Reports raise serious doubts. This is one part of the story. There is blood in China's large-scale mines too. There, workers are abused, discriminated, beaten, and made to work without contracts and sufficient ration. One worker told the media, and I'm quoting, "If a worker dies, the Chinese don't report it to the government. They bury the person, hiding the corpse, and bribe the family to keep quiet." That's your electric car killing people even before it hits the road. Did you sign up for this? The world's biggest car makers are complicit in these crimes. I'm talking about the likes of Tesla, Volvo, Renault, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen. They all source cobalt from Chinese mines in Congo. Sure, they claim to have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to child labor, but they too know that there is no way to fully map their supply chains. Back in Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi has pledged to act. In 2019, he established a state-run company to focus on health and human rights. But that hardly helps when Congolese officials are accused of overseeing child labor. In 2020, Tesla announced it would start using cobalt-free lithium-ion batteries in its electric vehicles, but the company followed up the announcement with a deal with Glencore. It's a cobalt mining company, and this deal was for 6,000 tons of cobalt a year. 6,000 tons a year. Doesn't add up, does it? Much like the claim of electric cars being clean, these cars run on dirty energy, on blood batteries. And this is not climate solution. This is human rights abuse. And the two cannot coexist. Climate solution is not supposed to be at the expense of human lives. Long story short, electric vehicles have miles to go before they can claim to be clean.
Elon Musk, great to see you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I mean, we're here at the Texas Gigafactory the day before this thing opens. It's been pretty crazy out there. Thank you so much for making time for a busy day. I would love you to help us kind of cast our minds, I don't know, 10, 20, maybe 30 years into the future, and help us try to picture what it would take to build a future that's worth getting excited about. You've often said, the last time you spoke at 10, you said that was really just a big driver. It's, you know, you talk about lots of other reasons to do the work you're doing, but fundamentally, you want to think about the future and not think that it sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, you know, there's a lot of discussion of like this problem or that problem, and a lot of people are sad about the future and that they're pessimistic, and I think this is not great. I mean, we really want to wake up in the morning and look forward to the future